Ladies and gentlemen, can I ask those who haven't yet done so to take a seat for what is going to be the last plenary session of this 2022 FIAT IFTA World Conference in Cape Town Century City Conference Center. Ladies and gentlemen, we're gonna close this this conference, and we are going to do so first with a habit that we have since, say, 5 years, to do, like right before the closing session, we bring the audience back into one central room for a plenary talk. And that plenary talk will be delivered today by someone who I really feel her, in the sense that she would have loved to be here so much. I'm talking about Bríd Dooley, head of archives at RTE, former general secretary and former president of this conference, who has been lobbying with her organization to be here. Unfortunately, that didn't work out, but she is here. She's going to deliver her presentation online, and without further ado, I'm gonna give the word to her. It's all yours, Bríd.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for inviting me to give this presentation today, the last of the day, 3 of the conference, to you all in Cape Town. My name is Bríd Dooley. I'm head of the archives for RTE, which is Ireland's public service broadcaster. And the title of my presentation today is about marrying theory and practice in the whole world of digital transformation. And it's really about a journey of a broadcaster that started life in 1926 with radio, and from 61 moved into television, celebrating 60 years on the 31st of December last year of our television services. And in 2026, fast approaching, we will celebrate 100 years of broadcasting. So to all intents and purposes, we can say that we are very much a traditional, old-fashioned, long-standing, established organization, and the kind that if you read the textbooks of the digital world that can left behind, get eaten up, or simply be bypassed in this brave new world of digital. So during the pandemic, I undertook a short study of the subject of digital transformation, mainly to better inform myself as a leader, head of archives, of what it really means. And I only really scraped the surface of the subject. I did manage to achieve a diploma in digital transformation management, but I'm not about to give any lectures anytime soon. What I would say is that I've learned a few key theories that now inform my practice. And I suppose the first of these is really to understand the world we're living in. It is hyper-connected. It is the age of information. It's the 4th industrial age. And for a public service media organization, what all of that means is about being digital, but being digital first as our strategy, about managing and growing audiences and our value to them in the way in which we connect with them. Because it is the customer today. It is the customer who decides how, where, and when they're going to connect. And media convergence has really revolutionized the way in which our audiences connect with us. For a public service media organization, there's another factor, however, in this very highly competitive world of media. It is that we're trusted. We're trusted with our quality. We're trusted with our content. It's the DNA of our offer. And archives themselves are the largest single repository of quality content. And they're a mirror, really, of these core values of quality and trust. But for our value as an archive of that legacy that we record, keep every day, to be realized in this digital media environment, it can only be done if we're actually working with the providers and the customers, our nodes in their whole network. So a digital transformation strategy is not about any one part of the organization. It's not about the technology. It's not about that. It's about a whole of organization approach to really achieve that digital first service that we desire. Definitions and jargon is something we all know too well. We have been talking about digital in our business for a very long time. And it has had as many definitions as we've had conferences. What we do know today, however, is that understanding what this means in practice is critical really to the success of our failure or success in this digital world. And there are three basic terms that we need to get to grips with and to disentangle this jargon and understand how it's used. The first of these, the simplest of all, of course, is digitization. And in archival terms, it's the reformatting of objects from analog to digital format. It's simple to do, costs a lot of money, requires a lot of effort and preparation, but we know what it means in essence. Digitalization, on the other hand, is a further aspect of the whole digital way of working. It's about harnessing tools and technologies, tools that are interconnected, removing silos in how we work and inefficiencies in the way in which we do business for ourselves and for our customers and our processes, and effectively removing those pain points and continually improving our service as we do and measuring that. The third, then, digital transformation, is a whole other ballgame because it is not just about what we do, it's about a whole of business strategy. And as archives inside a broadcaster, we are part of that whole structure. So redefining our business purposes and in line with the business purpose of the whole organization, as well as our remit, focusing on who the customers are, our customers, our organization customers, our audiences. And there are many different kinds of customers there, but how they want to connect to the archives, what they need to know about the archives, and what they need us to do, and adopting the appropriate tools and technologies to meet those expectations. In 2018, RT set out its public strategy. This is something it does every 5 years. It's agreed with the department who's responsible for RT's licensing through a regulatory authority. And it has to set annual commitments to meet the targets and objectives that it sets out in that strategy. So RT at that point set itself on the road of becoming a digital-first organisation and a public media that would be fit for the 21st century. It talked about putting audiences first, connecting and engaging with everyone wherever they were and are at any point in time. And to do all of this, it had to make investments, it had to make changes, not just in how we connected and what we did, but the digital infrastructure, the tools, everything from our studios to our systems, to our playout systems, to our people and services, to how we worked, the tools we had to work with. And of course, recognizing the value and importance of archives for the Irish public is the piece that was of most interest to us and the one which we strove the most to have in that strategy. And we were delighted when there was an external independent review called of the archives, which was to look into what our needs were that we had presented. And the findings from this by an independent expert group recommend that investment and funding be put in place to safeguard the archives and to deliver access. So what has that all meant in the last number of years? Well, it has meant a lot of change and a lot of planning and a lot of development, because there are a range of interconnected projects, enormous projects in terms of both buildings, technologies, how we actually interconnect different systems that we are either deploying anew or that we are procuring for. For ourselves in the archives, the first part of this was initiating the biggest project that we would undertake and have undertaken in the archives in my time there, which is basically the planning for the digitization of all of the audio and video collections with the film as well to follow. We have begun work on our film, but we have a huge collection to do yet in terms of our production materials. The video and audio are the two biggest ones that we needed to start with because of their vulnerability and because of the need to get this material ready for our digital first environment and to make it accessible. At the same time, there was a parallel investment in a suite of software applications to transform the processing and the management of media for production archive and for the distribution processes. And that's essentially leading into the investment into digital storage platforms for all of our media content. So at the heart of all of this will be, and the planning is therefore, a new MAM system. And digital transformation can only happen if all of these pieces come together and work in a way that delivers a business outcome that meets everybody who is, I suppose, who is using these systems, but also helping to improve and develop these systems and serving from them and with them over the next 5 to 10 years of RTE's output. All of these projects are led by technology in one form or another. But they are delivered in collaboration with all of the business functions of RTE. And I think it's the most critical change. We have always had projects with our technology department and others. But this time, I believe what is happening in the world of digital transformation is that there is far more collaborative problem solving, expert-led and expert exchange projects taking place where for us, with the archives becoming the biggest single tenant of two of these major systems, the MAM and the storage solutions, makes sense. We can't do this alone. We need to work with all of our colleagues in the different departments. We're both a customer ourselves of the business and we're a supplier to the business, and we have much more to do besides. So it's in all of our interests to find to work together. So becoming a digital archive is a pretty complex business. And these are some of the sort of key changes and projects that are happening at the moment. When we began 10 years ago demonstrating the value of what we do to get to this point where the digitization of our legacy, that we begin to overcome this as the first critical hurdle. We had some smaller funding awards and they are ongoing, and we hope we will have more of those for very high value collections to fast track those, but we are also working on the bigger plan about how we can get all of the material into digital format. We have defined the requirements for our digital management solutions at a very granular level, and we have worked thoroughly and painstakingly in doing that. There's still a long way to go, but we will be adopting our new technologies to manage digital assets and services, firstly as a development system for this year with our new partner, Dalit. We're also working with our technology, finance, business users and production services to actually make all of this happen, because again, none of it is done in isolation of other business areas who interconnect continually with the archive. And wedded to all of this is the plan for a digital preservation strategy. We have already the bones of this in place with the storage plan that's been put in place, but we have to make sure that we know that it will do what we ask of it in terms of preserving our archive as the digital world changes continually over a number of years, in terms of ensuring that our teams are able to stand over the preservation guarantees and the fixities that we will need to check regularly and have systems to check for us with our colleagues in technology. I suppose the biggest single change as well for us is talking a little more about ourselves inside our organizations, redefining our role, our mission, and really our vision as part of One RTE and as the archives of RTE and keeping the memory of RTE. So our digital journey is complex, but at its core, there are some simple components that make sense to all of us. We have been carefully and steadily defining our business purpose and revising it from time to time. And the pandemic is a very good example of that, where we had to really look carefully at what services we were providing to whom and what we could continue to do in terms of business continuity. And it really led us to look very carefully at how we would deploy tools and what we could do better when we get to the point where we're implementing our MAM solution and digitizing the archives and making these available again in new ways to our clients. We needed to understand the market better that we were operating in. We know that digital first for everyone is a must, but it isn't always easy because you're trying to deploy appropriate digital technology sometimes before you even get there. And that can end up with a lot of workarounds and a lot of patches to try and get you over these small hurdles. But nonetheless, as long as you're working carefully with the different teams and you are documenting and keeping a very clear eye on what your direction of travel and where you want to end up, you will avoid too many of these myriad workarounds and avoid silos again, as we have had in the past. The key drivers for the whole archive and for us as a business unit within RT to deliver on RT's remit is really what we are about. We have a regulatory remit to preserve our archives. We have to define that time and time again, because it can mean different things, and there's always a risk there of it not being fully understood. What does it mean to establish and maintain archives? We need to use all of the standards, the guidelines, and the tools in our possession to actually make this clear to ourselves and therefore be able to inform others. We have a regulatory remit as well in RT to license and to provide professional services. So again, we do need to make sure that our users are served in timely fashion and that are given the opportunity to discover the archive and use it in the way that they would like, particularly in the creative media sector, which we are there to support. But we also have a regulatory remit to develop access for the Irish public, and we have been doing this for a number of years, and we will be growing that further and enhancing it over the coming years. We also want to grow the value of the archives further across the whole organisation as part of its public service media remit. And recently, for example, we were very closely involved with a campaign to celebrate 60 years of television, but in doing so to also campaign for the importance and the value of public media and how it's been serving audiences, and in particular Irish audiences, over 6 decades for television. And lastly, we are a dual funded organisation, so we have a responsibility to help to grow revenue streams. So we must make some return on the investment that both the organisation and our regulatory authorities make into our services for the archives. And we do that through our sales and licensing. And that has grown, but what we would hope is that by making it easier and more streamlined for our users to use our services in the future as these systems and these processes change and come on board, that we will grow our revenue streams quite naturally, because more discoverability equals more licensing, more demand. And again, we have seen that demand grow through the pandemic, and we would like to capitalize a little bit more on that now that we moved out of it, and new productions, of course, have come on stream more. So what have our achievements been so far? Well, we've restructured all of our services and teams across our business to reflect our core services under 4 pillars, which are archiving and preservation, user services, publishing and partnerships, which incorporates our public access, and our ancillary archives, document and photographic collections. We have been researching and working on a draft digital preservation policy for the archives, and this is supported by the business and will be managed with our colleagues in technology as an ongoing dynamic area of our work. We commenced the digitization of our legacy collections. Our audio is underway and our video project planning is now complete and partners selected, and we will be working on developing the digitization program for that and putting it in place in the coming months. We also have done detailed work in defining our MAM solution, the requirements for that. We have selected our supplier there also, and we will be working with them, putting our plans in place to begin to put a development system, which will be separate to our ongoing business systems, which will work in parallel for the moment. But just to test all those requirements very, very carefully and to ensure everything that we want and have sought will work to a greater extent and will work across the business, because all of the MAM solution elements are integrated with the rest of the business, from channel management to production to storage to user services. So all of this is going to require a lot of our careful attention over the coming year or more. And the challenge really is to ensure that we deploy a system ultimately that we can build on, that we can grow into the future, and that we can continue to improve from here on. And I think the most important element of all of this really is the project teams and the knowledge and the learning. I suppose if I think about, the next steps in all of this and these blocks here and these building blocks, and the top layer is very much about our people, and the underneath layer is very much about all the stuff and the systems and the technologies. But clearly everything we have to do in terms of our knowledge and our knowledge building and our training is here in the way in which we actually develop and plan digital transformation as a business as a whole. And I think if we look at what digital transformation for the archives mean, it's to keep innovating, improving and developing, setting goals and targets on every step of the journey. Again, I would reiterate that there are some core blocks of theory that really help when you're going through this, because you bear in mind the whole time that it transcends the traditional roles. You have to get uncomfortable sometimes because you get asked questions that are sometimes hard to answer, but you have to kind of trust in the process too, maybe trusting in the science is a way of putting it. We have to adopt technologies that really work for ourselves as an archive, but for all of the business as well. We have to redefine our roles, what we do, the skills we need. We have to really move our people up the value chain. We also want to create efficiencies in how we do things. We're going to have greater volumes of digital data to manage from here on. We've only dipped our toe in the water so far, and we will and are looking at machine learning to see how it can help us in different aspects of what we do. We want to enhance discoverability. We want to create new business opportunities, and we know they are there. We already are in huge demand as an archive for a myriad of different kinds of creative productions, for public exhibitions, for professional and heritage activities. So there's a range of services that we really want to improve our appearance and our footprint in. We want to deliver enhanced engagement. There's no doubt about that. It is painful at times to try and find our content. We've got firewalls, we've got all sorts of issues that make it difficult, and we want to remove some of that pain by using the technologies and using the tools at our disposal to make that possible. And ultimately, we want to guarantee the archives for the organisation, the 100 years plus one day from now, with 5-year iterations in between, knowing that we've got to continually manage, monitor and ensure that our archive will live as a digital entity into the future. And also, of course, to see where the technologies of the future will go. And again, to ensure that that obligation is not a one-time event. It's now a dynamic living thing. The learnings for myself in the study that I undertook and in how I've looked anew and afresh at the way in which we work is that digital transformation is very much a continuum. It's really about the communication strategy amongst ourselves, our people and our teams, and that collaboration is the watchword. Without it, you really can't do this on your own. You've already failed if you're doing that. It also brings new expertise because there's people around that table you haven't met or heard before. It ignites innovation, it sparks new ideas, and also with external stakeholders and lots of new business areas and partners that maybe we haven't had the opportunity to do much with before. And most importantly of all, it's the continual review of what we do and why, to make sure that it is this what we should be doing? Is this our business, or is it something else? Or is that something that kind of should be done somewhere else? It's nothing to do with us at all, but we just always did it. We've got to continually ask that question. We've got to measure progress as well, and look at models like capability, maturity, and see where do we fit? Where do we exist in those measures and those standards? And of course, continually optimize and drive improvements. It's as detailed as I could make such a presentation to you all in 20 minutes that you could possibly take it all in and that I could possibly tell you what we've been doing. But there is a huge change going on at RTE, and the RTE Archives is at the heart of that. I'm extremely proud of the fact that we've got such wonderful teams and such wonderful, I think, ways of collaborating as an organisation. It's not to say it's all plain sailing, but what I would say is that I think we're firmly fixed with our eye on the future prize, and that is going to be a much changed, much lighter, but also much more enjoyable experience, not only for our users and the services we provide, but for ourselves, and really to enjoy and see the value of the archives for what they are into the future. So thank you from me, and I wish you a pleasant close of conference, and enjoy the rest of your time in Cape Town. Thank you. Bye-bye.
So while Bríd stays on for a few questions, maybe, right, Bríd? I'm looking around in the room for someone who would like to raise their hand. Are there any questions for Bríd? Well, I have one, Bríd. I was wondering, hearing your story about your pleas and your lobbying, I was wondering, was it easy to convince your management, for example, that you, as head of archives or one of your team, I don't know, was directly involved with government lobbying, or how did that go? That process, that connection with higher authorities, like, okay, we as an archive, we have a role to play here. Did you feel represented by your board? I mean, it's a tricky question. I know that that it might be a delicate answer as well, but I'd like to ask you to answer in all honesty.
Sure, I think I can, because some of it's in the public domain anyway. First of all, there are many layers and there's lots of glass ceilings around archives, much as there are around our gender over the years. I think it's one of those hard things. You always feel you should be at the table, but it's hard to get there. So yes, I think from 2011, when we were part of the digital enterprise, because we've had so many different structures along the way. We're now part of what's called RT Content, which is great. But prior to that, there was a structure, there was a division called Digital. And the head of Digital was a very dynamic woman. And once we were in her reporting line, she took responsibility. She didn't really understand anything we were talking about too much, I think, or, you know, I don't mean that in any pejorative sort of way, but she knew the value of the archives. And she really helped us to use communications as a tool and a strategy. And and there are colleagues and people from industry, and in fact, our new service supplier for our video, Memnon, in the room, who I must have, I think, worn the ear off a number of times trying to figure out how, in God's name, we could find ways of convincing people of the value of this. I mean, it has been a long road and a long journey, but what happened in the end was that, having written several strategies, having done countless presentations, having commissioned videos, having our board, and the structure of our board is that we have obviously our executive, which runs the organization, but we have a governance board which sits between us and the government, and then the government department instruct that regulatory board or regulatory authority as to what we should be doing, and then they monitor all of that. And they're quite powerful, obviously, because that's their function, is to make sure we're accountable for the public money we get and what we say we're going to do. So it was a combination really of that side of the government telling RTE to some extent that it needed to do it, and our board saying, you know, this material is seriously at risk. This is essentially a national archive. And I think it was subtle. It wasn't as, you know, blunt as that, but all of those pressure points was more so than us going to lobby government for funding, because we wouldn't be doing that. We do apply for funding through various schemes. There is structures there for that, but they are smaller chunks of money. They're not insignificant, but they just wouldn't touch the surface of the archive. This funding has come, and I didn't put it into my slides, but it has come from land sale money. So RTE sat on a very expensive property, and sits on a very expensive property in Dublin 4. And a lot of it was just redundant, you know, parkland. It wasn't really parkland, but it was an old, I suppose, house, you know, large house estate going back, you know, to the 19th century. So they sold some of that land and got approval to do that. So that's where the funding has come from. So we are a capital project, and we are one of the investment pieces. So RTE had to do that in order to make the investment into its digital infrastructure. So there is, at least to some extent now, a safety net of that money being there, because one of the challenges in any kind of OPEX projects is that you really don't know what's going to happen, as we know, from one year to the next. So we're very hopeful that the funding that we have been assigned, which is ring-fenced to the archive projects and is accountable back to that RTE board, that is delivered by us over the next 5 years. We're held to account on it. So that answers your question, but that's the journey we went on, and that's how we got there. So some of it's luck, some of it's just the hard graft, some of it is others fighting your cause, and sometimes you don't even know they're doing it. So yeah, so we've been fortunate, so we're delighted.
Thank you. Very clear and very elaborate answer. And you mentioned to circumvent the delicacies there, I think, a bit. So thank you for your talk, Bríd. I'm once again looking into the room. Any remaining questions? If not, we are about to close this conference, but let's give Bríd once again a round of applause.